The dust is rising up to swallow the plains of Boeotia alive, moving like a massive, suffocating creature. You are looking at thousands upon thousands of Persian arrows screaming into the sky, blotting out the sun until it looks like midnight at noon before crashing down, like a storm of iron rain into shattering shields, ripping through flesh and snapping bone. The earth itself is literally groaning under the sheer crushing weight of an empire on the march, a military force so colossal it drinks entire rivers dry as it moves, commanded by a narcissist god-king who truly believes every single blade of grass on this continent is already his personal property. And standing right there in the middle of the road, blocking the path of this unstoppable juggernaut, you have a group that is outnumbered, completely exhausted, and abandoned by half the people they are supposed to be protecting. It is roughly 10,000 Spartans and the man seeking vengeance for their dead king, sinking their sandals deep into the bloody mud and absolutely refusing to give up a single inch of ground. Let's get one thing straight. This is not a battle. This is set up to be a public execution. The Persian general Mardonius has already written the final scene in his head, envisioning a world where Sparta is nothing but a distant memory, and all of Greece remains on its knees forever. You might think you know how this story goes. You have seen the movies, you have read the books, but I am telling you right now, you don't know the half of it. You know the opening scene. You know the legend of Leonidas. You know the story of 300 men dying with glory in that narrow pass at Thermopylae. You were told their sacrifice changed everything that it saved Western civilization. But here is the hard truth nobody wants to tell you. Thermopylae was a total disaster. The pass fell, the mission failed, the road was kicked wide open, and the Persian forces poured through that gap like a biblical flood, burning the great city of Athens down to grey ash, smashing its holy temples into unrecognizable rubble and leaving every single Greek city drowning in a tidal wave of terror. The sacrifice of those 300 brave souls did not end the war. In fact, it almost ended Greece entirely. The real moment of truth. The specific point in time that actually decided whether Western civilization would survive or be strangled right there in its cradle didn't happen in the mountains. It came 12 months later on an open killing field where a Spartan army marched out not to buy time, not to delay the inevitable, but to slaughter every last Persian soldier and pay back every drop of spilled Greek blood with serious interest. And folks, that day of reckoning nearly never happened. Before a single sword was even drawn at the Battle of Plataea, Greece was ripping itself to pieces. Cowardice and corruption were rotting the alliance from the inside out. Sparta had barricaded itself behind high walls, looking out for number one while their allied cities were being reduced to plumes of black smoke. Athens was burned out, its people homeless refugees, and the city came within hours of waving the white flag and surrendering to Persia entirely. The Greek army itself was about to be starved into submission, cut off from every single water source, pinned down under relentless lightning-fast cavalry attacks, because their religious leaders and priests claimed the gods had not given them permission to fight back yet. And rising from that hopeless, chaotic mess, you see poisoned wells. You see a towering Persian cavalry commander decked out in gold-plated armor, getting dragged off his high horse and butchered right there in the dirt, and you see rivers so choked with dead bodies that the water stopped flowing. In those final desperate seconds, one man completely out of weapons and out of options would pick up a jagged rock from the blood-soaked ground and cave in the skull of General Mardonius himself, crushing the will of an empire and rewriting the future of the entire world. Before we step onto this battlefield together, drop a comment down below telling me exactly what city and country you are watching from right now, and if you haven't subscribed yet, you need to fix that immediately. You are watching the uncut truth of history, digging into the darkest chapters on the planet. Flames are pouring off the ruins of Athens like the breath of a blast furnace. The Persian army isn't just rampaging through the streets in a chaotic riot. This army moves with a terrible, calculated patience, dismantling the city block by block, structure by structure, taking apart a civilization with the cold precision of a surgeon. Massive timber beams crack and cave inward. Sacred statues of the ancients topple into the fire and vanish forever. Temple walls, once painted in bright, vibrant colors that told the stories of gods and heroes, are blistering black and crumbling into heaps of glowing ash. The stench of this destruction travels for miles, carried by the wind across the water all the way toward the Peloponnese, a smell that no one who breathes it will ever be able to scrub from their memory, the scent of charred wood, scorched marble, and the unmistakable sickly sweetness of burning human flesh. When night falls, the sky above the city pulses with an angry orange glow, a false dawn that never seems to end. This is the true receipt for Thermopylae. It wasn't glory, it wasn't salvation. It was just borrowed hours, and those hours have now been spent. In the south, the bad news arrives even before the survivors do. Soldiers who barely clawed their way out of the wreckage stumble into Sparta and Corinth, carrying the same unbearable message: Athens has ceased to exist. The Acropolis, the spiritual heart and soul of the Greek world, has been ransacked and set ablaze. Persian boots have crushed a path through Boeotia and Attica without facing any meaningful resistance whatsoever. The handful of citizens who were stubborn enough to stay behind are either dead or in chains being dragged toward a life of horrific slavery in a foreign land. The city that once stood as the loudest, proudest voice in all of Greece, the city that mocked Sparta for its austerity and silence, is now nothing but a nation of ghosts, its people scattered across borrowed islands, sleeping in fishing boats and dirty animal shelters, staring north at a massive column of smoke that marks the grave of everything they ever built. Greece doesn't feel like a civilization anymore. It feels like a crime scene. The impossible victory at Marathon already seems like a distant dream that belonged to a different race of people. And Thermopylae, celebrated in song and story as the ultimate act of defiance, now looks like nothing more than a gravestone planted on the highway the Persians used to gut the heart of the Greek world. Back in Sparta, the ghost of Leonidas haunts every single conversation. His body still belongs to the enemy. His 300 men are just bones and dust in a foreign mountain pass. Tales of their final stand have reached every corner of Greece, but the brutal truth refuses to be dressed up in pretty language any longer. Their courage brought absolutely nothing permanent. The Persian advance rolled right over their sacrifice like a river rushing over a stone. The Spartan elders, the Gerousia, along with the Ephors who hold the true political power, are staring at their maps, counting their dwindling warriors, and looking at the inferno consuming everything to the north of them. And they arrive at a decision that would have made Leonidas want to spit right in their faces. They order construction to begin on a wall. Not at some distant frontier, not at another strategic mountain pass to save their allies. They begin stacking stone timber and packed earth across the Isthmus of Corinth, that thin strip of land connecting the Peloponnese to the rest of the Greek mainland. The calculation is simple: if that barrier holds, the cities of the south might survive. If it breaks, nothing will be left standing. From a distance, it looks like a strategic military calculation. But up close, it reeks of pure desperation. Spartan citizens and their allies are digging trenches, dragging boulders, and hammering sharpened wooden stakes into the ground. They are working with the frantic energy of men building a dam while the floodwaters are already rising around their ankles. And the message this wall sends to Athens isn't spoken aloud, but it screams across every mile between them. You are on the other side. Your suffering is not our problem. In the cold arithmetic of Spartan leadership, the Peloponnese is the homeland, and it is the only thing that matters. Everything beyond the isthmus is just expendable territory, a buffer zone, a sacrifice they are willing to make without losing a single minute of sleep. Inside this fortress mentality, Pausanias carries a burden he never volunteered for. He isn't a king. He is just a placeholder, a regent standing in for Leonidas' young son, Pleistarchus, who is far too young to take the throne. Every order Pausanias gives is measured not just against the crisis at hand, but against the towering memory of a dead man who chose to face total annihilation rather than take one single step backward. Leonidas marched into the open and dared the largest army on earth to kill him. Pausanias now presides over a construction project stacking rocks while the world his predecessor died to protect burns to cinders just beyond the horizon. To many Spartans, the comparison is already devastating. He looks smaller, he looks afraid. North of the wall, across the scorched and conquered landscape, Mardonius observes every Greek move with the patience of a man who knows he holds most of the winning cards. He is no brainless destroyer. He is the brilliant strategist Xerxes trusted above all others to finish what the great king started. He has watched Sparta retreat behind its pathetic barricade. He has seen Athens reduced to a homeless population clinging to islands and coastlines. And he understands something that most Greeks are too proud or too terrified to admit. Their alliance is not held together by a shared purpose or brotherhood. It is held together by fear, old grudges, temporarily set aside, and the thinnest possible thread of mutual need. One clean cut on the right thread and the whole thing unravels into chaos. He realizes he doesn't need to destroy every Greek army on the field. He just needs to turn them against each other. He chooses his target with surgical precision. Athens. The city with the deepest hatred for Persian rule, but also the deepest, most festering wounds. Its people own absolutely nothing now. No rooftops over their heads, no farmland to grow food, no grain stores to feed their families. Their fleet won a spectacular victory at Salamis, yes. Themistocles and the Athenian captains shattered Persian naval power in those narrow straits. But a victory at sea cannot rebuild a house or feed a starving child. Athens is drowning in warships and starving on dry land. Without allies willing to fight on the mainland, their navy is a weapon with no war left to win. And every Athenian knows deep down that Sparta, their supposed partner in this life or death struggle, is cowering behind a pile of stones and refusing to take a single step north to help them. Mardonius extends his hand, not toward Sparta. He reaches out toward Athens alone. He dispatches his envoys, among them Alexander of Macedon, a man who walks the fine line between Greek heritage and Persian loyalty, carrying an offer designed to be almost impossible to reject. Athens can have everything back. Their temples rebuilt from the ground up, their farmland restored and protected, their democracy left completely untouched. But it is more than that. They can rule over other Greek cities with the full backing of the massive Persian Empire behind them. They can become the most powerful state in Greece overnight, the favored partner of the King of Kings himself. The price for all of this is simple. It is time to cut the cord on this failed Greek experiment and bow down to Persian rule. They are done sleeping in the dirt of refugee camps. They are finished begging Sparta for a lifeline that never arrives. No more watching their little ones shivering on the cold decks of warships, while their supposed allies hide behind a wall that isn't even finished. Inside those camps, where the Athenian families are packed like sardines, the debates are tearing through the community like a wildfire in a dry season. Some folks see the deal exactly for what it is, a golden leash, sure, but the other end is still held by a master. But then you have the others, the ones who are just too exhausted to care about principles anymore. They are parched, they are starving, and they are watching their own children fade away right in front of their eyes. Why keep bleeding out for an alliance that ghosted them in every way that matters? Why sacrifice an entire generation for a partner that refuses to even step off their front porch? The tension is alive, breathing and tightening its grip with every passing second. And every single leader on the Greek peninsula understands the scorecard here. If Athens takes that deal, the war is over in a heartbeat. The entire Athenian navy flips to the Persian side. The northern coalition, it crumbles into dust immediately. Sparta and their neighbors down in the Peloponnese would find themselves sealed up behind their own wall with zero naval power. No buffer zone to the north, and the deadliest military machine in history, free to starve them out or smash them whenever they feel like it. So, the Athenian leadership decides to make one final desperate power play. They aren't aiming at Persia. They are aiming the gun right at Sparta. They send their diplomats south, marching right past the construction crews hauling rocks and driving stakes into the ground. These Athenian ambassadors might sound respectful, but the message they are carrying is a knife held straight to Sparta's throat. They lay it out in words that are polite, but impossible to misinterpret. We stood shoulder to shoulder with you. We bled out at the Battle of Marathon while you guys showed up late to the party. We burned our own city to the ground, rather than hand the keys over to the enemy. And now while you cower behind a pile of rocks, we are being offered back everything we lost by the very empire you claim to fight. If you won't march north, if you won't meet us in the field, we are out of options. We will take the Persian deal, and the second we do our navy sails under their flag. Our knowledge of your coastline, your hidden harbors, your tactical weaknesses, Every bit of that intel goes straight to General Mardonius. It won't just be Athens burning next time, it's going to be Sparta. And the whole world is going to remember that when push came to shove, you chose a wall over a fight. The silence in that room is deafening. Pausanias and every elder in that Spartan assembly feel the earth move under their feet. This isn't just a straight-up brawl between Greece and Persia anymore. This is about to become a full-blown encirclement. If Sparta refuses to move, the Persian army rolls down from the north while a betrayed, vengeful Athenian navy hits them from the coast. That wall they built as a shield, it turns into a coffin. And the legend of Spartan grit, the identity they have built for centuries, the one thing that makes them more than just a dusty town on the map, will be exposed as a total fraud. Their enemies, both Greek and Persian, will hold the pen that writes history, and that story is going to say that when the world needed Sparta, the most Sparta hid in the basement. That is a terror that no Spartan war council has ever had to prepare for. It isn't the Persian spear they fear, it is the deletion of everything that makes them Spartan. Their entire civilization is built on one single concept, that they are the men who never back down, who never flinch, who would rather die on their feet than live on their knees. The Athenians just took that image, tore it into shreds, and held it up for the world to see. You are hiding. You are letting free Greeks die while you stack rocks like laborers. For a culture that treats cowardice as a sin worse than death, those words hit harder than a heavy cavalry charge. Pausanias walks out of that meeting with a fire burning behind his eyes. He knows the math. He understands every single risk involved. A full-scale campaign across central Greece means exposing the absolute core of Spartan manpower on open ground where one bad day, one catastrophic defeat could erase their entire warrior class from the history books. And yet he also sees it with a clarity that cuts through all the noise staying behind, that wall is now the deadliest option on the table. Doing nothing will cost them Athens. It will cost them the war. And it will cost them the only thing Sparta has ever truly cared about, its reputation. He has to drag his city out from behind the barricades and turn it back into the monster the world fears. He has to become what Leonidas was, but without the advantage of a narrow pass and a glorious suicide mission. He has to actually win. The decision is made behind closed doors, no pomp and circumstance. Sparta is marching. And this isn't a gesture. This is not a token detachment sent to save face. The single largest Spartan army ever assembled is leaving the Peloponnese. We are talking full citizen warriors in those iconic crimson cloaks flanked by massive columns of helot servants and allied fighters pulled from every loyal city in the south. They are not going to sit around waiting for Persia to test the wall. They are taking their bronze shields north, straight into the wide-open killing fields where battles aren't decided by walls, but by nerve training and the sheer will to stand in a line and push until the other guy breaks. When the order to mobilize ripples through the city, it happens without politicians making speeches or grand declarations. There is only the cold, efficient machinery of a society built for exactly this specific moment. Shields are taken down from their mounts on the walls. Spear shafts are tested for stress fractures and blades are ground down to a razor's edge. Bronze armor is fitted and refitted not for a parade, but for function, every buckle and strap double-checked, because a single failure point in the line means death for the man standing next to you. Mothers and wives deliver the words that have echoed through generations of Spartan women: "Come back carrying your shield," or "Come back lying on it." And the boys who are too young to march stand along the dusty roads in silence, witnessing something they will carry in their memories until the day they die. Nearly the entire fighting strength of Sparta is assembling, forming ranks, and preparing to leave the only home most of them have ever known. The march doesn't kick off with drums or trumpets at sunrise. It starts in the pitch black. Torchlight flickers along the narrow streets as the columns take shape and the moonlight catches the curve of bronze helmets moving in long, unbroken rows. There are no war cries here, no songs, only the deep, rhythmic percussion of thousands of sandaled feet striking the packed earth, mixed with the quiet groan of leather harnesses straining under the weight of weapons. The Spartan army moves like a single living organism swallowed by the night, heading north through the isthmus and into lands already scarred by Persian occupation. Behind them, that half-built wall stands abandoned in the dark, no longer a shield, but a monument to the fear they have finally chosen to leave in the dust. As the word spreads along the highways, other Greek cities feel the tremors. Some are emboldened, others are absolutely paralyzed. A Spartan army of this magnitude marching north means something massive and irreversible is about to go down. Men in Corinth, Megara, and a dozen smaller towns are facing the hardest choice of their entire lives. March alongside Sparta and risk total annihilation, or stay home and pray to whatever gods will listen that Persia shows mercy to those who didn't fight back. One by one, with varying degrees of guts and reluctance, the allied contingents begin to move out. Tegeans, Corinthians, Plataeans, they all fall into step behind the Spartan vanguard. The road north transforms into a vast, grinding river of shields, spears, and grim-faced men, all flowing toward a violent collision that none of them can fully picture yet. Somewhere in the middle of that endless column, Pausanias marches with his officers caught right between two impossible standards. Ahead of him waits the cold reality of the cold. Pausanias isn't marching toward a last stand. He is marching toward a verdict. If he wins, those 300 men didn't die for nothing. Thermopylae transforms from a failure into the opening act of a victory. But if he loses, everything is gone. Every sacrifice, every death, every shred of meaning the Greeks have tried to stitch onto their suffering hits zero. And while this army pushes deeper into enemy territory, I want to hit the pause button for a second and speak to you directly. If you are still watching, if this level of detail matters to you, then you aren't just a tourist passing through. You are one of us. This channel exists because a core group of people refuse to let these stories disappear into shallow Wikipedia summaries and algorithm fodder. We call them the lineage. Joining isn't just about throwing coins at a creator. It is about standing in the shield wall beside the people who make sure history gets told with the depth, the time, and the brute honesty it demands. Members of the lineage get early access and behind-the-scenes intel, but what they really provide is the foundation that makes everything you are hearing right now possible. If you feel that pull, if this is where you belong, consider joining the lineage and taking your place in the line. Now, far to the north, the Persian camp is stirring with unease. Riders are galloping in from the frontier. Scouts who have been watching the southern roads are bringing urgent reports to Mardonius. Sparta has left the building. This isn't a raiding party. It isn't a scouting force. We are talking thousands of their absolute best warriors, the real deal, marching north in full battle order. The army that was supposed to cower behind stone and mortar has stepped into the open and is heading directly down his throat. Mardonius surveys his own forces, the sprawling sea of tents, the cavalry pickets, the infantry drawn from every province of the known world, and for the first time, the shape of this war shifts beneath his feet. He is no longer chasing refugees and burning empty cities. He is barreling toward a collision course with the absolute heart of the Greek military machine, a force that has finally stopped bickering and united under a single terrifying command structure. They aren't marching to cut a deal or stall for time. They are coming to burn his entire operation to the ground. Mardonius, the Persian commander, has to look at the battlefield with fresh eyes, stripping away his arrogance. He realizes the Greeks aren't going to just stumble blindly onto a flat kill zone like amateurs. They are going to hunt for the high ground. The rough patches, the places that neutralize his greatest asset, his cavalry. As he scans the topography around Plataea, the strategy starts to click in his mind. The ridgelines, the treacherous river crossings, the broken earth, this is the kill box. This is where the final act plays out. On paper, he's got the upper hand. He has the manpower, he has the elite horsemen. He has the archers capable of blotting out the sun. But strip away the bravado, and there is a cold, sinking realization hitting him in the gut. If he drops the ball here, if this Spartan-led coalition cracks his formation wide open in broad daylight, the myth of Persian invincibility is effectively dead. The empire itself might limp on, and the throne back in Asia remains secure. But the dream, the grand ambition of swallowing the West whole, that dies forever. With the smoke of a burning Athens still choking the skyline and the rhythmic thud of Spartan sandals getting louder every night, Mardonius is experiencing a glitch in his programming. He's feeling an emotion he's never authorized himself to feel. A genuine tremor of doubt. The prey he thought he had trapped, the enemy he was convinced was broken and cornered, has broken the containment field. And now that beast is charging straight down his throat with absolutely nothing left to lose and an entire civilization to avenge. The Greek army crests the ridgeline overlooking Plataea and hits the brakes. Below them, the world opens up into a massive rolling plain that runs all the way to the Asopus River. But it's what lies beyond that muddy water that makes every single man in the column stop and take a deep, shaky breath. The Persian encampment is sprawling across the horizon like a pop-up metropolis. Massive banners snapping in the wind, picket lines of cavalry horses stretching for miles, and infantry blocks so deep they look like a solid wall of humanity. Pausanias, the Spartan regent, takes one look at that layout and spots the trap immediately. It's as if Mardonius drew him a map and labeled it, "Do not enter." He knows the math. If he orders his men down that slope and tries to ford that river, they'll be fighting uphill on the opposite bank while eating a storm of arrows with zero cover. Before they could even think about forming a phalanx, the Persian heavy cavalry would slam into their exposed flanks and grind them into dust. The flat ground on the other side of the water is a cavalry general's wet dream and a graveyard for heavy infantry. So, Pausanias makes a command decision that goes against the aggressive DNA of Spartan culture. He refuses to take the bait. He slams the brakes on the advance. He anchors the Spartan line and their coalition partners along the jagged, uneven foothills terrain that is a nightmare for horses, but perfect for a disciplined shield wall to lock down and hold. The river sits there between the two massive armies like a line in the sand that nobody has the guts to cross. The Greeks stare down the Persians. The Persians stare right back. It's a high-stakes game of chicken, and both sides know the rules. The first army to splash into that water forfeits their tactical advantage and hands the enemy a massacre on a silver platter. The result is total gridlock, a paralysis on a scale the ancient world has almost never witnessed. You have 100,000 Greeks on one side. Guy and both secretly terrified that Guy and both secretly terrified that they've miscalculated. Days start to bleed together. The heat ramps up to unbearable levels. The atmosphere turns into a toxic soup of sweat, rotting leather dust, and the overpowering stench of horse manure. Bodies from minor skirmishes along the riverbank start to bloat and burst in the heat. Clouds of flies descend like a plague, crawling over the faces of the living and the dead alike, treating food and open wounds with the same sickening indifference. Men are standing in heavy armor for hours on end, eyes locked on an enemy line that keeps shifting and shuffling but never actually commits to the fight. Toxic rumors start spreading through the Greek ranks like a virus. Some are whispering that Pausanias has lost his nerve. Others are arguing that he's the only genius keeping them alive by refusing to walk into the woodchipper of the Persian cavalry. The truth is somewhere in the brutal middle. The Greek defensive position is rock solid against a direct assault, but they are slowly being strangled by an enemy. No shield can deflect time. They are running out of resources, and morale is leaking out by the hour. Mardonius is reading the battlefield like a grandmaster who has played this game 1,000 times. He knows he can't throw his infantry uphill into a meat grinder against a Spartan phalanx. Even with his superior numbers, the terrain would chew up his formations before they ever got within striking distance of the Greek shields. He needs a different tool for this job. He reaches for the one trump card the Greeks can't match: his heavy cavalry. On one of those suffocating, endless afternoons, a disturbance ripples through the front of the Persian line, signaling a shift in tactics. A column of elite horsemen trots out in tight formation armor, gleaming their mounts, draped in expensive ornamental gear that flashes like mirrors in the sun. And leading the pack is a figure who looks like he was genetically engineered for war. This is Mecistius, one of the top-tier cavalry commanders in the entire Persian apparatus. The man is a tank. He is armored from his throat to his ankles in layers of gold and steel scale that covers every inch of vulnerable flesh. His horse is decked out in gilded trappings. A deep purple cloak the color of royalty and death flows behind him. Even from a mile away, every Greek soldier knows instinctively that this isn't just some mid-level officer. He looks like something forged in a furnace, not born of a woman. Mecistius doesn't make the mistake of smashing his cavalry into the Spartan center. He's smarter than that. He probes the line. He tests the defenses. He's hunting for the weak link, the terrified conscripts, the units stuck on lower exposed ground. and he finds exactly what he's looking for among the Megarians. They are stationed in a sector that's basically a kill zone with zero natural cover. The Persian horsemen sweep in like a tidal wave, unleashing volleys of arrows and javelins at point-blank range before crashing their heavy horses directly into the shield line. The Megarian shields buckle and snap under the pressure. Men are trampled into the dirt. Horses are barreling through the formation, iron hooves crushing ribs and skulls. The cavalry pulls back, reorganizes, and hammers the same broken point again and again and again. It's systematic destruction. The Megarian unit is disintegrating in real time. Their runners scramble to Pausanias with a message that cuts through all the military protocol. "Reinforce us right now, or we are dead men." The Spartans are too far down the line to get there in time. Pausanias pivots to the Athenians and asks for a suicide squad. This is the moment of truth. This isn't about navy ships or politics anymore. It's about blood and iron. Athens has to prove it can stand on solid ground and bleed against the absolute best mounted warriors the Persian Empire can throw at them. A hand-picked unit of Athenian heavy infantry steps up to the plate flanked by their archers. They rush into the gap and lock their shields together, plugging the hole in the line. When Mecisteus sees the fresh meat, he doesn't even blink. New faces just mean new targets. He drives his horsemen straight into the reinforced position, trusting his invincible armor to shrug off whatever the Greeks throw at him. Arrows shatter against his golden breastplate. Spear tips scrape harmlessly across his shield. Even as his own men are getting knocked out of their saddles around him, Mecisteus pushes deeper into the Greek formation, hacking and slashing from his high horse like a man who truly believes he is untouchable. Then, in a split second, the entire paradigm shifts. A single Athenian spear bypasses the rider and punches straight into the horse. The animal screams, its front legs collapse, and it pitches forward violently, launching its rider face first into the churning mud. In one heartbeat, the predator becomes the prey. On his horse, Mecisteus was a god of war. On the ground, dazed and pinned down by the sheer weight of the armor that made him invincible, he's just a man trapped in a bronze coffin. The Athenian soldiers swarm over him like ants. Their initial attacks are useless. Swords clang off his plate armor. Spears slide off the metal scales without leaving a scratch. Mecisteus is thrashing underneath them, trying to get up, fighting with his hands, his knees, anything he can move. But the pile of bodies holding him down is just too heavy. When the thrashing finally stops, Mecisteus lies dead in the dirt, his magnificent golden armor now caked in mud and blood. The Persian reaction is instantaneous and feral. The cavalry surges forward to recover the body. Archers rain down sheets of arrows to cover them. The battle devolves into a brutal bar brawl over a single corpse. Tactics go out the window. Men on both sides are grabbing limbs, pulling at armor straps, punching and clawing to drag the body their way. Weapons are dropped in the mud, fists and rocks replace swords. It's raw, primal violence. But the Athenians refuse to let go. Their archers start picking off every rider who tries to push through the scrum. Eventually, the Persian cavalry breaks and pulls back, forced to leave their fallen idol behind. The Greeks strip Mecisteus of his legendary armor and haul his corpse down the entire length of their battle line. It's a dark, grim parade, part trophy display, part psychological warfare. The warrior, who looked unkillable an hour ago, is now just a dead body, being carted past cheering soldiers. A massive surge of confidence floods through the ranks. If this giant can die, then the Persian war machine isn't immortal. On the other side of the river, the vibe is apocalyptic. Mecisteus wasn't just a boss, he was a national hero. His death hits the Persian camp like a physical punch to the gut. Soldiers are shaving their heads in grief. They're cutting the manes of their horses in mourning. Even Mardonius, usually stone-faced, is shaken. He hasn't just lost a subordinate. He has lost a tactical weapon he cannot replace. But even this morale victory isn't enough to bait Pausanias into a reckless attack. Killing one spectacular horseman doesn't change the geometry of the battlefield. The river is still there and the trap is still waiting. Look at the open ground beyond the front lines. That territory is effectively occupied by the beast system, controlled entirely by the heavy cavalry of the Persian war machine. The deadlock holds fast, immovable as a tombstone. The sun doesn't just rise, it drags itself across the sky like a burden, one brutal, punishing day after another. And as this stalemate stretches into eternity, a new demon begins to devour the Greek army from the inside out. We are talking about a famine of resources. Supplies are hitting absolute zero. You have to understand, the Greeks did not march north with a kingdom's worth of inexhaustible provisions. They are depending on wagon trains crawling up from the Peloponnese like a fragile lifeline and on whatever scraps of food can be scavenged from the surrounding countryside. Mardonius, the architect of this imperial oppression, sees this vulnerability clearly. He looks at their supply lines and sees a jugular vein, and he moves to sever it with ruthless demonic efficiency. He unleashes his cavalry, but he does not send them against the Greek front line where the shields are locked. No, he sends them against everything behind it. These riders fan out across the landscape like locusts, torching every field, every barn, and every storehouse that somehow survived the earlier devastation. Supply wagons caught on the roads are ambushed, their drivers slaughtered, their contents burned to ash or scattered to the wind. Herds of livestock, the very lifeblood of the army, are driven off into the wilderness or butchered right where they stand. The land around Plataea transforms before their eyes into a charred wasteland, a ring of scorched earth tightening like a noose around the neck of the Greek position. Inside the camp, the consequences are immediate, and they are without mercy. Bread rations are cut, and then they are cut again. Meat vanishes entirely from the menu. We are talking about men who have been standing in heavy bronze armor under a blazing, unforgiving sun for days on end. They go to sleep with empty stomachs and wake up spiritually and physically weaker than the day before. But let me tell you, as bad as the hunger is, the thirst is a far more savage beast. The Asopus River is gleaming right there, just ahead of the Greek position, tempting them. But reaching that water means stepping out onto exposed ground where Persian archers and horsemen are waiting to rain death upon them. Behind the Greek lines, water is becoming desperately scarce. There is only one source keeping this entire army from dying of thirst. The army does not simply retreat. It collapses. It disintegrates. And Mardonius, in his cunning, knows exactly where that spring is located. His scouts, his local informants, the Greeks who sold their souls to the Persian side, they have told him everything. He does not need to capture this holy ground, he just needs to make it lethal. The Persian cavalry rides out on a targeted mission, not toward the main battle line, but toward the lifeline behind it. They reach the Gargaphia spring and turn the sanctuary into a killing zone. Water carriers, approaching with clay jars and leather skins, are met with a hail of arrows. Men are shot through the neck as they bend down, desperate to fill their vessels. Others stagger back into camp with shafts buried deep in their shoulders, spilling more precious water than they managed to collect. The harassment is relentless. It does not stop for a second. The horsemen churn the ground around the spring into a swamp of mud and filth, desecrating the source. Some sources claim they drag animal carcasses into the water, poisoning it right at the source. Whether every specific detail survived the centuries intact matters less than the result. The Greeks begin to see their only reliable water supply as a death trap, a place of judgment. Arguments erupt over who has to make the next run into the valley of the shadow of death. Volunteers start to disappear. Fear replaces thirst as the dominant sensation in the camp, and then the thirst comes roaring back 10 times worse than before. The army is now caught in a torture chamber designed by geography and enemy intelligence. A river they can see with their eyes but cannot safely reach. A spring they desperately need but cannot safely use. The sun pounds down on bronze helmets and leather-wrapped shields, turning every man into a walking furnace. Lips split open. Tongues thicken in their mouths. Some soldiers begin hallucinating about water in their fitful sleep, only to wake up enraged at their own minds for the cruelty of the dream. Murmurs of resentment spread like a plague. The fragile coalition that holds this army together starts to fray at the edges, snapping thread by thread. Pausanias is being crushed from every direction at once. His soldiers are starving. His soldiers are dying of thirst. Allied commanders are questioning him openly now, their whispers becoming loud enough to be heard across the entire camp. They say he is letting the army wither on its feet, rather than risking one decisive clash to settle the score. And here is the hard truth: they are not entirely wrong. He knows that if he remains frozen on this hillside much longer, he will command an army of corpses. But he also knows that if he throws that army across the river in a desperate charge, the Persian cavalry will shred it to pieces before the first shields even lock together. Every path leads to destruction. He can only choose the shape of the catastrophe. Meanwhile, over in the Persian camp, conditions are better, but they are far from comfortable. The empire's logistical machinery keeps food and water flowing, but sustaining a force this massive, hundreds of thousands of soldiers and animals, strains even the vast resources of Persia. Mardonius remains confident on the surface, but beneath that confidence runs a sharp awareness that this standoff cannot last forever. The clock is ticking for him too. His attacks on the spring and the supply lines are calculated provocations designed to push Pausanias into doing something reckless. Either the Greeks charge forward in desperation and are destroyed on open ground, or they try to withdraw and are caught in the chaos of movement. Both outcomes end in a total Persian victory. Mardonius simply needs the Greeks to make a move. As another punishing day bleeds into a copper-colored dusk, the Greek commanders gather in the dim interiors of their tents. The conversations are terse, exhausted, and increasingly desperate. Water, food, morale, terrain. Every topic circles back to the same inescapable conclusion: they cannot survive here. The only viable option is to pull back toward the town of Plataea itself, where wells still hold water, the ground is more defensible, and supply lines can be shortened enough to actually function. But retreating across open ground in the broad daylight is not an option. The Persian cavalry would ride them down before half the army cleared the first ridge. That leaves only one possibility. They have to move at night. The plan that emerges from these hushed councils is meticulous in theory, but it is absolutely terrifying in practice. The entire army will withdraw under the cover of darkness, peeling away from its current positions in coordinated stages. Small rearguard units will hold their ground until the last possible moment, maintaining the illusion of a full line while the bulk of the force slips away into the shadows. Each contingent will follow a designated route to a new defensive position closer to Plataea. If the execution is perfect, Dawn will find the Greeks established on stronger ground with access to water and tighter supply lines. They will have shifted the battlefield overnight. But if anything goes wrong, if units lose contact in the blackness, if communication fails, if one contingent moves too early or too late, the orderly Greek front will shatter into isolated clusters stumbling through the dark. Each one will become a perfect target for a sudden Persian cavalry attack at first light. Before we plunge into that night, I want to step outside the story for a moment. Everything you have just heard, from the deadlock at the river to the brutal killing of Mecistius and the slow strangulation at the Gargaphia Spring, is built on years of scholarship condensed into a single source that has guided this entire episode. That book is not some casual reading material. It is a dense, uncompromising deep dive into the military reality of this war, and it is the single best resource available for anyone who wants to understand what actually happened on this ground. This is the real deal, the meat and not the milk. You will find it linked directly to this video. If you open the shop connected to this channel, it is right there waiting for you. Owning it means you are no longer just watching this story. You are studying it on your own terms at your own pace with the full weight of the evidence right in your hands. And while you are there, take a moment to explore what else we have built around this episode. There is a collection of carefully selected pieces tied to the world of Plataea atmospheric items designed to pull you deeper into this history than any screen can take you. I will not describe them here. You need to see them. Discover them for yourself behind that same link. You will also find our full curated library, the Essential Dark History Collection, a shelf of titles we consider mandatory reading for anyone serious about understanding the most brutal and transformative moments in human history. Open it up, browse through it, let this story become something you carry with you beyond this video. Back on the darkening hillside above Plataea, the decision is final. The Greeks will not sit here and die of thirst. They will move. Orders pass down the line in low voices, hand to hand, officer to officer. Prepare for a night march. No torches unless absolutely necessary. No raised voices, equipment is secured. Straps are tightened and loose metal is wrapped in cloth to prevent any clinking sound. Some soldiers feel relief that the waiting is finally over. Others feel the cold grip of dread in their gut. Moving a massive army at night is dangerous under the best conditions. Doing it within striking distance of the largest cavalry force on the planet in terrain they barely know, with hungry and dehydrated soldiers who have not slept properly in days, that is something closer to madness. It is a gamble with destiny. As the last light drains from the sky, the outlines of the Greek formation dissolve into shadow. Torches are dimmed to glowing embers. Conversations collapse into whispers and subtle hand signals. The army prepares to vanish. Somewhere in the darkness ahead, a signal will come. And when it does, entire sections of the line will begin to peel away from their positions and melt into the night, moving toward Plataea, and the wells that might keep them alive long enough to fight. On the far side of the river, Persian scouts crouch in the darkness, straining their eyes for any change in the pattern of Greek campfires. Mardonius has been waiting for exactly this moment, a moment of vulnerability, a crack in the discipline, a chance to send his horsemen thundering into a disordered enemy before they can set their shields. Midnight approaches like a held breath, and the fate of the free world hangs in the balance. The Greeks are standing on the precipice, about to gamble their entire existence on a blind, desperate retreat through the valley of the shadow of death. We are talking about moving through hostile territory with the deadliest cavalry force the ancient world has ever seen, just waiting for a single crack in the armor to strike the instant confusion reveals itself. But watch this. There is always that one spirit who refuses to bow. One Spartan officer is already digging his heels in, fully prepared to defy the withdrawal order, because to him, retreating is a spiritual betrayal of the very foundation Sparta was built upon. By the time the sun breaks over Plataea in a few short hours, the world as they know it will be unrecognizable. The clean lines and the strategic order gone. In their place, you are going to see absolute chaos, scattered souls, desperate sprints across open killing fields, and the start of a massacre that neither side truly orchestrated. The command moves through the darkness like a rumor in the church pews, a whisper passed between ghosts. No trumpet sounding the alarm. No shouted decrees from on high. Officers are moving through the sleeping ranks, shaking men out of their slumber with a heavy hand on the shoulder and a few clipped urgent words. Packs are thrown on weary backs. Spear shafts are gripped with white-knuckled intensity. One formation after another begins to peel away from the line, sliding backward into the night, blindly feeling their way across unfamiliar terrain toward the life-giving wells near Plataea. Let me tell you, there is absolutely no glory in this move. No war songs are being sung. It is just the muffled shuffle of thousands of sandaled feet and the quiet creeping terror of men who realize that one slip-up, one stumble, one panicked scream could bring the entire weight of the Persian cavalry crashing down on their heads before they can even lift a shield in defense. For most of these allied contingents, survival has overtaken dignity. They know this hillside is a death trap. They move because they were told to, angling toward the town. But right there in the center of the line, the withdrawal begins to rot from the inside out like a spiritual cancer. Units are losing their moral compass in the dark. Without a clue if they are even heading, without a clue if they are even heading towards salvation. That disciplined front, that wall that held the enemy at bay for days, it is quietly dissolving formation by formation, gap by gap. It is becoming every city for itself, each soldier focused on their own survival, hoping against hope that someone somewhere is managing the bigger picture. But over on the right flank, where the Spartans are holding the line, the night is anything but silent. The remnant is stirring. A commander named Amampharatus hears that withdrawal order, and something deep in his spirit catches fire. It is not relief he is feeling, it is revulsion. To this man, this is not a tactical repositioning. This is flight. This is his cowardice dressed up in fancy military language. His entire existence has been molded by a single unshakable principle hammered into his DNA since he was a child. A Spartan does not yield ground. He holds it, he fights on it, or he bleeds out on it. Creeping away in the dark while the enemy sleeps feels like spitting on the graves of every brother who fell at Thermopylae. And now Pausanias, the regent himself, has to come down personally to handle this rebellion. The fact that the ruler of Sparta has to walk through the gloom to argue with a subordinate officer tells you everything you need to know about how close this army is to a total fracture. Pausanias lays out the hard truth in plain English. The water is gone. The men are parched. The army is bleeding out without a single Persian sword even being drawn from its sheath. The plan is not to abandon the fight, brother, but to shift onto ground where they can actually drink, eat, get their heads right, and then destroy the enemy on their own terms. Amonpharitus stands there listening, jaw-tight, teeth clenched, vibrating with rage. Then he bends down, grabs an enormous stone from the earth, a literal rock of offense, drags it forward and drops it at Pausanias' feet with a thud that cracks the silence like a broken bone. "This is my ballot," he declares. "It stays, and so do I." You have to understand, in Spartan tradition, votes were sometimes cast by how loud you shouted or by physical demonstration. Amonpharitus has weaponized that custom against his own leadership. The stone at the regent's feet is his formal refusal, immovable, absolute, and defiant. His men are watching. If Pausanias tries to force this issue, the Spartan wing could tear itself apart right there in the dark. If he concedes, a single officer's stubbornness dictates the fate of the entire Greek army. The argument grinds on through precious wasted minutes, while all around them the rest of the coalition is already melting away into the night like mist. Every second of delay is just tightening the noose around their necks. The further the other contingents withdraw, the more dangerously exposed the Spartans become. Pausanias cycles through every tool in his arsenal. Threat's logic appeals to the greater good, reminding him that a glorious death on a waterless hillside accomplishes absolutely nothing if the army it belongs to disintegrates around it. Eventually, as the deepest, darkest hours of the night slip past, Amonpharitus finally relents. But barely. He agrees to move, but he drags his feet so deliberately with such attitude that by the time the Spartan column finally begins its withdrawal, the rest of the Greek army has already fractured across the landscape. Dawn does not arrive gently, friends. It tears the cover away like a hand ripping a bandage off a raw wound. As the first grey light spreads across the plain, Persian scouts peer across the river and see something that makes their hearts accelerate in their chests. The Greek battle line has vanished. In its place, total disorder. You have got clusters of men near Plataea, other groups caught frozen in mid-movement across open ground, and stragglers still scrambling for positions they cannot seem to find. And most dangerously of all, the Spartans and their Tegean allies are exposed and alone, still clinging to their original positions, separated from the rest of the army by a widening gulf of empty terrain and shattered coordination. Mardonius receives the reports and understands instantly that this is the moment he's been engineering for days. The Greeks are fractured. They are no longer a wall of unity. They are scattered pieces of a broken formation, and broken formations are exactly where cavalry does its most savage, bloody work. He sends his horsemen forward, first thundering across the river, hooves shredding the soft banks, riders fanning out to harass, pin down, and cut off any Greek unit still caught out in the open. Then he sets the infantry in motion. The Persian camp erupts into controlled chaos. Drums are pounding like a heartbeat. Officers are screaming orders, standards tip forward. Tens of thousands of men snatch up their weapons and pour toward the disintegrating Greek position like a flood. Persian cavalry crashes into the strung-out Greek center, catching units between positions, scattering formations that have not yet found solid ground to stand on. The contingents from the various allied cities stumble toward Plataea in rough, disorganized groups. Some reach the outskirts of the town and form hasty defensive lines, while others drift towards scattered shrines and stone walls, grabbing whatever defensible terrain they can reach. This grand alliance looks nothing like an army anymore. It looks like a collection of desperate men trying not to die alone. The Spartans, marooned on their rise of ground near a small sanctuary, face the starkest choice on the battlefield. They can run for Plataea and be ridden down by cavalry on open ground, their backs exposed and their formation shattered, or they can turn, plant their feet, and fight right where they stand. Pausanias does not hesitate. He stops the column, wheels his men into battle order, and locks the Spartan line alongside the Tegeans on that shallow rise. Shields go down, spear points go up. They know no reinforcements are coming to save them. They know the rest of the army is scattered to the wind. They know they are about to absorb the full fury of the Persian assault all by themselves. The first thing that falls on them is not men, but arrows. Persian archers, the finest in the known world, begin pouring volleys into the Spartan position with devastating, lethal precision. These are not wild shots fired blindly into the sky. They are aimed. They seek out the gaps between the shields, The exposed faces the brief flash of unprotected flesh when a man shifts his grip or turns his head. The Spartans crouch behind their heavy bronze shields and endure the storm. Arrows slam into wood and metal with a sound like hammers striking anvils. Some find their way through the thinner armor, punching into shoulders, thighs, and necks. Men fall without ever having lifted their spears in anger. The Tegeans beside them are absorbing the exact same punishment. Blood begins to pool in the dust around the formation. Pausanias watches his men dying under fire they cannot answer, and every fiber of his warrior training screams at him to give the order to charge, to close the distance, to stop this slow execution. But he does not move. He is waiting for something that no modern commander would understand, but no Spartan commander could ever dare ignore. The omens. An animal is brought forward. A priest cuts its throat and examines the entrails with hands slick with hot blood. The reading is unfavorable. The gods say no, not yet. Another animal is brought up. Another killing, another reading, still wrong. The signs refuse to grant permission. Spartans are dying under a hail of arrows, while their commander stands over a pile of animal guts, waiting for divine authorization to fight back. It is maddening and to the Spartan mind absolutely non-negotiable. You do not advance without favorable omens. The gods speak through the sacrifice. To ignore them is to guarantee your own destruction. The pressure becomes almost physically unbearable. Shields are studded with so many arrows they look like the backs of iron porcupines. Wounded men are pulled to the rear of the formation, which grows shallower with every passing minute. Pausanias moves through the ranks, his voice steady, his presence the only thing keeping some of these men from breaking under the strain. Discipline holds. The training that began when these men were just 7 years old, ripped from their mothers and thrown into a system designed to turn boys into living instruments of war, that training holds firm. They do not run. They do not charge without permission. They stand there and they take it. On the far side of the battlefield, the Athenians and their allied units crash into a different fight entirely. Mardonius has positioned his Greek allies on this flank, and standing right there among them are the Thebans' Greek hoplites fighting for Persia. Shield meets shield, spear meets spear, brother against brother. The discipline of Athens, honed in the fires of Marathon and hardened by years of relentless warfare, crashes into the stubborn resolve of Thebes, with a noise that shakes the very foundations of the plain. It is a deadlock of epic proportions. The Athenians find themselves pinned down in their own desperate struggle for survival, completely cut off and unable to break away to assist their Spartan brothers. The reality is stark and unforgiving. Each half of the Greek army is now an island forced to stand alone and either secure victory or face total annihilation without reinforcements. Over near the sanctuary, the situation is critical. The Spartan position is being pushed to its absolute breaking point, teetering on the edge of collapse. The Persian forces sense the shift in the atmosphere. They can feel the Greek line weakening under the relentless storm of arrows, and they press the attack with renewed viciousness. Enemy cavalry sweeps in close enough to hurl javelins directly into the packed formation, delivering death at point-blank range, before peeling away like ghosts. Before the hoplites can even think about responding. Wave after wave of infantry pushes forward, emboldened by the sight of the legendary Spartans bleeding and standing stationary. The ground surrounding the formation is literally carpeted with spent arrows and the crumpled bodies of the fallen. Pausanias, realizing he is rapidly running out of earthly options, lifts his face to the heavens and cries out to the gods of Plataea. He calls them by name, a desperate intercession, begging them to release his men from this torment and give them the green light to fight back. The next sacrifice is prepared with trembling hands. The priest slices open the animal to read the signs, searching for any glimmer of hope. This time the message is different. The entrails speak of favor, the omens align. The heavens have finally answered with a resounding yes. The transformation is instantaneous and absolutely terrifying to behold. The command to advance tears down the Spartan line like a bolt of lightning striking the earth. Every single spear snaps up in unison. Every shield locks forward into a wall of iron. The formation compresses, transforming from a group of suffering men into a single unstoppable mass of bronze and righteous rage. Men who mere seconds ago were crouching under a hail of arrow fire with nothing but grit keeping them alive are now surging forward. They are propelled by the accumulated fury of days of thirst, starvation, humiliation, and the trauma of watching their brothers die without permission to retaliate. This is not just a charge, folks. This is a detonation of the human spirit. The Spartans do not run. They advance at a measured killing pace. This isn't a wild, disorganized sprint that would break their cohesion, but a relentless grinding push that eats up the distance between them and the Persian front line with terrifying mechanical precision. As they close the gap, the effectiveness of the enemy's arrow volleys completely collapses. The archers are panic-stricken. They cannot find clean angles against a solid wall of shields driving straight down their throats. Shots deflect uselessly off helmets. Shafts skip across the tilted bronze like rain. The Persian infantry and royal guard units in the front ranks brace themselves behind their lighter wicker and wood shields, suddenly realizing that what is coming toward them is a judgment that no amount of archery can stop. The collision is catastrophic. The full crushing weight of the Spartan phalanx smashes into the Persian front line with the kinetic force of a landslide slamming into a wooden fence. It is the sound of total devastation. Heavy bronze-clad warriors drive their long spears right through the wicker shields and deep into the bodies hiding behind them. Persian soldiers hack desperately at the spear shafts, snapping some and dragging others aside in a frantic bid for survival. When a Spartan loses his spear, he doesn't hesitate. He draws his short sword and steps in closer, turning the battle into a suffocating press of blades, elbows, knees, and teeth. The fighting devolves instantly into something savage and intimate. It's thrust, shove, stomp on the man beneath you. You stab into whatever flesh is exposed. You step forward over the body of the fallen, and you do it again. It is a meat grinder. The plain around the sanctuary transforms into a literal slaughterhouse. Now, the Persian soldiers are not weak men. Many of them fight with astonishing courage, holding their ground against a force that outweighs and out-armors them at every single point of contact. But the truth is, their equipment was never designed for this kind of heavy metal warfare. Their shorter spears cannot reach past the wall of Spartan death. Their lighter shields buckle and shatter under the sustained pressure of a phalanx that simply does not know how to stop pushing. Once the front rank begins to cave in, the collapse ripples backward through the formation like a shockwave. Men in the second and third ranks find themselves in a nightmare scenario, unable to fight and unable to flee, crushed between the Spartans driving forward and the mass of their own army pressing from behind. Mardonius sees his line beginning to disintegrate and makes the decision that will define the final minutes of his existence. He refuses to watch from the rear like a coward. He throws himself directly into the crisis, mounted on his white warhorse, surrounded by his personal guard, riding straight toward the fracture point where the Spartan advance is tearing his army apart. His presence on the field is electric. Men who are on the verge of running for their lives see their commander charging forward and find something deep inside themselves that makes them turn and fight one last time. The Persian line stiffens around him. The advance begins to grind. The Spartans meet real, gritty resistance for the first time since the charge began, a knot of elite bodyguards and desperate infantry fighting with the fury of men who know their general is watching them. Fighting in this specific sector of the field is a man named Arimnestus, a Plataean officer who has already lost everything the Persians could possibly take from him. His city is nothing but rubble. His people are scattered refugees. He fights with the white-hot focus of someone who has absolutely nothing left to protect except the ground beneath his feet and the brothers beside him. Through the clouds of dust and the screaming through the tangled mess of bodies and broken weapons, he locks eyes on Mardonius. The Persian commander is unmistakable, mounted, heavily armored, directing the defense from the very center of the storm. Arimnestus has no spear. It has gone snapped or wrenched from his hands in the crush of battle. He has no javelin. He has no throwing weapon of any kind. But the earth beneath this battle is littered with stones. The very same stones that Greek farmers have been pulling from these fields for generations. He reaches down, closes his fist around a heavy, jagged rock and hurls it at the mounted figure with every ounce of strength and hatred left in his body. The stone strikes Mardonius squarely in the skull. There is no poetry in this moment. No dramatic duel between champions. A simple rock thrown by a man with nothing left to lose, but cracks open the head of the most powerful military commander on the battlefield. Mardonius falls from his horse and hits the ground like a collapsed building. He does not rise again. The effect is nuclear. Word of the commander's death detonates through the Persian ranks faster than any order ever traveled. His bodyguards freeze in horror. Some throw themselves over his body in a futile attempt to protect him. Others try to drag him away from the relentless Spartan advance. Most simply stop fighting and stare, unable to process the sight of the man who held their entire world together lying broken in the dirt. He was killed not by a general's sword or a king's lance, but by a stone torn from the mud by a man whose home they burned to the ground. The will that held the Persian army together snaps like a bowstring cut with a knife. The rout begins at the center and spreads outward at the speed of terror. Soldiers who had been holding their positions just seconds earlier spin around and run for their lives. The retreat feeds on itself, with each man who turns convincing the man beside him that staying means certain death. Units that were fighting hard suddenly find their flanks exposed as the formations around them dissolve into chaos. The entire Persian front collapses inward, men shoving past each other, trampling the fallen, throwing away their shields and weapons just to run faster. The Asopus River, which served as the boundary of the standoff for days, transforms into a killing field. Thousands of fleeing soldiers jam its banks in a panic. Men trying to cross are shoved under by the sheer weight of the bodies behind them. Others try to fight their way through the shallows and are dragged down to the bottom by their own waterlogged armor. The riverbed fills with the dead and the drowning. Many men die without a Greek blade ever touching them, crushed beneath the weight of their own panicked army, or pulled under the water by their own equipment. Those lucky few who make it across the river do not stop running. They sprint for the wooden stockade the Persians constructed around their main camp, a fortification built from timber ripped out of Greek towns and forests. The gates are hauled shut. Survivors scramble up onto platforms and walls in a desperate bid for safety. Archers take positions along the palisade and begin firing at any Greek who comes within range. Inside the walls, what remains of the Persian force tries to organize some kind of last stand, but the reality is that these men are no longer an army. They are refugees trapped inside a wooden box, waiting for the end. The Spartans reach the stockade and push against it, but siege warfare is not what they were built for. Their spears and shields are instruments of open field dominance, not wall breaking. They kill everyone caught outside the fortification and tighten their grip around the perimeter, but the walls hold for now. It is the Athenians, the Corinthians, and the other allied contingents arriving from their own brutal engagements who bring the violence needed to crack the camp open. The Athenians, still hot from their clash with the Thebans, and the Persian infantry on the opposite flank do not pause to rest. They attack the gates with axes, improvised rams, and their bare hands. Men hack at the heavy timbers while arrows rain down from above, punching through shields and dropping attackers where they stand. Others climb over the fallen bodies of their comrades and keep swinging. The sound of splintering wood competes with the screams of the defenders. Logs are shoved into the breaches from inside to plug the gaps. Greek soldiers tear them aside and keep chopping. It is not elegant, it is not tactical, it is brute force determination fueled by years of rage and loss. Finally, the gates shatter. Greek hoplites flood through the openings and into the camp. Inside, there is no room to form lines. The narrow corridors between tents and supply wagons become corridors of slaughter. Men can barely raise their arms without hitting the soldier beside them. The Greeks, tighter in formation and more organized, even in this chaos, move through the camp in wolf packs, cutting down pockets of resistance one cluster at a time. Some Persians throw down their weapons and drop to their knees in surrender. Others fight to the last breath, swinging wildly at anything that moves. In the tight, suffocating confines of the camp, mercy is a concept that belongs to a different day. The Greeks remember every burned temple. They remember every enslaved family. They remember every city reduced to cinders. They are not taking prisoners today. They are collecting a debt in blood. When the smoke clears and the divine judgment finally settles, the encampment looks less like a military base and more like the aftermath of a biblical plague. You have bodies stacked high like cordwood rotting between overturned chariots and shattered tents. The wooden barricades the Persians erected, thinking they could wall out the inevitable, have instead become the walls of their own coffin. If you dig into the ancient chronicles, they tell us that out of the massive horde, Mardonius marched into this valley, a force representing the global elite of that era. Only a tiny remnant managed to escape the slaughter. The losses for the righteous were real, sure, but they were nothing compared to the absolute devastation visited upon the oppressors. The scale of death at Plataea isn't just a statistic. It is a staggering testament to what happens when a free people decide they have had enough. In the days following the victory, the battlefield transforms into a vision that no living soul should ever have to endure. The blistering summer heat, symbolic of the fire of judgment, accelerates the decomposition of tens of thousands of corpses. The sky turns black, not with clouds, but with scavenger birds circling in formations so thick they cast a shadow over the Valley of Decision. Packs of wild dogs roam through the wreckage like demons claiming their due, and the weary survivors have zero energy left to drive them away. The river Asopus and every small creek crisscrossing that plain are choked, their banks lined with the dead. Greek soldiers walk through this valley of the shadow of death in silence, searching for their brothers, lifting them with the reverence due to martyrs. The bodies of the enemy are left where they fell, returning to the dust without honor. The Spartans, true to their code, raise a burial mound for their warriors, a simple heap of earth that speaks louder than any overpriced marble monument ever could. Other tribes mark their losses, and Plataea, this tiny town caught at the crossroads of an apocalypse, becomes holy ground, simultaneously a mass grave for the wicked and a symbol of ultimate liberation. The signal moves outward in ripples shaking the foundations of the known world. It starts with whispers in the streets, then confirmed reports from runners, and finally it explodes into celebrations spreading across the Greek territories like a holy fire consuming dry brush. The awakening has officially begun. The Persian war machine, the same beast system that burned Athens to the ground, desecrated our temples, and marched across the land, acting like they owned the planet, has been dismantled on an open plain by the very people it tried to erase from history. Their supreme commander is dead, his skull crushed by a stone, proving once again that giants fall when the people stand up. The survivors, fleeing back toward Thebes, are nothing but disorganized bands of refugees no longer capable of threatening the sovereignty of the free states. Along the coast and across the waters, the forces of liberty sense the shift in the atmosphere and begin striking at the crumbling remains of the empire's influence. The grand ambition of absorbing the mainland into a globalist one-world order, a project spanning generations, is officially. But as we see in current events, the politics that emerge from victory are predictably ugly. Sparta steps up to claim the glory for the land battle, while Athens insists their naval power was the real key. It's the same ego-driven division we see today, where old jealousies resurface to distract from the miracle that just took place. The alliance that barely held together long enough to win this war begins to rust and corrode almost immediately. But beneath the bickering and the power plays, one immovable fact remains standing like a pillar of salt. The Persian Empire will never again send a force of this magnitude to enslave these people. The window of opportunity for the enemy to extinguish independence with a single overwhelming invasion has slammed shut permanently. Now, as we look toward 2026, we understand that for the ordinary people, the aftermath isn't some instant golden age. The cities are still rubble, the infrastructure is gone. The farms are scorched earth. The family unit has been shattered by the trauma of war. Recovery is going to take years, maybe decades of hard labor. But the fundamental trajectory of their civilization and their DNA has been altered forever. They are no longer subjects, they are sovereigns. Athens is now allowed to rebuild its destiny rather than existing as a permanent outpost of a foreign administration. This freedom allows them to develop systems of governance, art, and philosophy that will radiate across the Mediterranean and echo down through the centuries to us right now. That ugly, desperate, mud-soaked fight carved out the space for civilization to breathe. If you go there today and walk the quiet agricultural land that covers the fields of Plataea, you won't find anything that screams of the violence that took place. You'll see gentle hills, ordinary streams, and farmland stretching toward a peaceful horizon. It looks calm, but the ground remembers. Beneath that deceptive surface lies the memory of a day when tens of thousands of human beings clashed in one of the most decisive engagements in recorded history. The 300 who fell at Thermopylae became legends, their story carved into the global imagination. But it was here at Plataea, in the dust and the blood, that the debt was finally paid in full. If you are still vibrating with me at the end of this broadcast, I appreciate you staying in the fight. Now do two things that take less than 3 seconds but make a massive impact in this information war. Smash that subscribe button and tap the like. These actions signal the algorithm to push real, suppressed history instead of the disposable distractions they want you to watch. And make sure you share this transmission with someone who thinks they know the history because they watched a Hollywood movie or read a comic book. Wake them up and show them what actually went down in the mud at Plataea. This is Ancestral, the premier channel for dark history and hard truths, and I will be right here waiting when you are ready to unlock the next chapter of the timeline.